I'm reminding you that these little pivot points here, where the curve changes, that is the history. So I'm trying to make it graphic for you so that you can go, okay, yeah, I see that. This is the greatest tragedy in world history to me. If the yellow turbans and the Christians being so remarkably similar is interesting history, this is even more interesting history. The world would be a different place if this thing hadn't happened, and that's my point. That's what I'm going to try to explain to you now. This astonishes me. I get sad over what happens in 1276 to this civilization, the Song dynasty. It is the most magnificent, cultured, decent, wise civilization China ever produced. And notice, what am I trying to communicate to you here? Please look at this. Please look at this. What am I trying to communicate to you here? It's on the rise. Now, did the Han end on the rise? No. You've got an idiot with eunuchs. Did the Tang end on the rise? No. You've got a doddering old man with a concubine and a rebel. Did the Zhou end on the rise? No. You've got another doddering idiot with a concubine, right? Did Qin end on the rise? No. You've got his idiot son. This one, 300 years, it's the only one that didn't end because it deserved to end. And that is the saddest thing in the world, because the world would be very different today if these mothers hadn't shown up just when they did. It would be so different. Oh, so here we go. Here's why it happened. Here's the Song dynasty. After this little dip, in 960 they took over. Walter. So in 960 they took over. Now notice what's happened around them. These are no longer nomads. These are now settled nomads because they've learned the art of civilization, agriculture, and everything from this ancient neighbor China. And so they're like, look, we've learned how to do agriculture. We've learned how to have governments and such. So these are former barbarian tribes that now have states with capitals and cities and governments and armies above them. So China now has, Germany had France next to it, a state, a modern state, a civilized place. China has these Khitan Laos. They're not Khitan is the nomadic tribe. They're not the most important player, though. These guys, the Jurchens, are the most important player. So I'm introducing you the three important characters of this drama: the Song, the Khitans, and the Jurchens. Notice the Xiongnu, they're gone now. The Xianbei, they became Chinese. They just, remember, they changed their names and Sinocized. They just became Chinese. So they just melted into being Chinese. So let's start with the Song. When they took power, they made the Confucian civil service examination the only way that you could join the elite. That's the first reason that it's beautiful. There was no longer a loophole for people who did not deserve to be sitting in elite places because they had money only or family names. You did not sit in elite places unless you merited it. Now, yeah, you could be rich, but you know what? If you were rich and lazy, you have no place among the elite. If you're rich and stupid, you have no place among the elite. If you're rich and incompetent in any way and cannot pass this exam the way anybody else can, equal playing field, you don't deserve a place among the elite. This led to the most efficient government China had ever had up to that point, and that's why it was on the rise, because it was run by, finally, only philosophers, not just some philosophers and then some, Donald Trump's cousin. All right. That's why the words the Confucian transformation are there. They transformed the Song. They transformed the government by making it a strictly examination-based civil service exam. It was the most perfect government because it was merit, it was not family, it was not money. There was nothing wrong with having money, but if that's all you had, there's no place at the table for you. Goodbye. I have here in 1126, that's when an interesting thing happens. So you notice they've got their Yellow River. They've got their capital here. That means they've got their Silk Road, but they've got all these barbarian states around them now. The Xia over here, another barbarian state. Look down here, Tibet. The Tibetans have been around China for a long time, and they're starting to become a fairly threatening nomad type too. They're raiding southwestern China and all sort of thing. So they are surrounded by now civilized, civilized, meaning they have states and governments and such all around here. Even the Uyghurs, who are into Xinjiang today. In other words, this is the Northern Song, and notice it's called Northern. And there it is. There's the Silk Road. You see it going all the way over, blah blah blah. But here's what happens in 1126. The Song dynasty, they were Confucians, and you know how they defended against the Liao tribe to the north that had that state, Liao, the Khitan Liao tribe? Do you know how they defended against it? They're Confucians. What do you think? Do you think that they're going to have a strong military? They're going to spend a lot of money on a military to fight these guys? Well, you're wrong, because Confucians aren't stupid. Those Liaos that were up there, they were fairly aggressive. They had a 1,000,000-man army. They had a huge army that they funded. But they also paid the Liao, just bribe money. Again, kind of like somebody earlier did. Oh, Liu Bang and the first Taoist Han before Wu Di. Just pay the barbarians because it costs money to send an army and feed an army and get soldiers killed. So why not just pay the guys for peace? Just bribe your way into peace instead of spending that money that you would spend on bribes to get people killed in war. So the Song did both. They kept a huge army because they didn't trust them, but at the same time they paid them for the longest time, for the first 150 years. At one point, they felt like they needed some help because the Liao started getting aggressive. And so the Song asked these guys, the Jurchens in Manchuria, will you help us? Because they're your enemy too. So with you over there and us over here, we can both take these guys. And the Jurchens said, yeah, okay, you need our help? That's interesting. We'll help you. And they took these guys, and then they went on and they took the Yellow River. That's the story. Thus the dip in 1126. Do you see it down here? The Jurchens conquer the Yellow River. So for the second time, like the period of disunity, China loses its heartland. And you can see it on the map better here. And they call their dynasty the Jin, the Jurchen Jin. Okay, J-I-N. Do you see the blue area here? The Southern Song? What economic lifeblood did they lose when the Jurchens took the Yellow River? Economically, what did they lose?
They're agrarian based.
Well, no, this is Southern. I mean, thank you for playing. This is Southern, so they've got rice, they've got agriculture here. Remember the
Great.
The Grand Canal, because the Grand Canal's terminus is on the Wei River, right, which is right next to the Yellow River, right? So they lost the Silk Road. They lost the Silk Road when the Yellow River disappeared. That means they lost all those revenues. You would think that economically that would destroy their ability to instead recover quickly and go even higher and better than when they were the whole Song dynasty. Now they're just the southern half of it, but they recover and they go better. Now how do they do it? What would you do if you lost your ability to trade over land? Guangzhou is on the map here. This is Hong Kong's right here. It's Canton in English. Up here in this area, they started doing shipbuilding. And the Song dynasty said, we can't trade our silk and our porcelain and our tea and everything that everybody wants because you can't get silk anywhere else. We can't sell through the Silk Road anymore because these bastards have taken the Silk Road from us. So they started a state-sponsored shipbuilding thing. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he said, I'm going to build the U.S. interstate system with government design, government funding, big government. I'm going to make big things happen. These guys made big things happen by making a merchant marine. Massive, massive, massive shipbuilding went on. And the Chinese at this point start trading into Southeast Asia, into Singapore, into Malacca, Malaysia, and into the Indian Ocean basin. So they become international traders by water. Yeah.
What were the people south of China, like Thailand, Indochina, all of them up to at this point in time?
Vietnam is a vassal state, kind of. So they recognize they've got long-lasting relationships. The emperor has to be the son of heaven, and he has to be Confucian, and he has to be Taoist, and he has to be non-coercive, Wu Wei. He has to attract them by his virtue. And so that means that he has to be benevolent even to neighbor states. And they have to say, like the Zhou vassal said to, or the Shang lord said to King Wen when he, during the Pope time, you are so superior. We recognize that. You're such an excellent man. So in the same way, the Chinese kings had to be that type of model and try to have harmonious relationships with all of the neighbor states.
But they were civilized in the south.
Yeah, Vietnam was civilized. But in the Chinese cultural sphere. The other ones, yes, but on a far less developed level. And so this is when Southeast Asia starts becoming populated with Chinese quite a bit. This is an easier picture to see. There's the north, they've taken it, and so these guys, and I love this, is my, what do you do? Path of least resistance. You can either fight these guys, which is not very Taoist at all, not very wise, because you're water not following the path of least resistance. These guys just like, oh, okay, we can't trade that way, we'll just build ships and we'll go that way. And they end up dominating the Indian Ocean basin. I just want to focus on this. And look at this. It's amazing how little we know the world geographically. They end up dominating the trade that had gone on between India, Africa, Arabs, Persians, Burmese, and Malays, especially down here in Malacca, and Indonesians for thousands of years. For thousands of years. Since the Roman Empire, since the Han Dynasty and the Qin Dynasty, the Malays had been major seafarers, traders to India, to Africa, to all sorts of things. The Indians, the Persians, the Africans, the Arabs, and the Malays in this Indian Ocean basin, this was the heart of global trade. Because Europe over here, they're still picking their nose and they don't, they're in the Middle Ages. They're not making anything. They don't have cities. They can't write or read anymore. Europe is the most backwards, retarded country on the planet, region of the planet. Because when Rome fell, nothing replaced it. Well, except for a few monasteries and priests saying the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. No government was there. So China ended up becoming the major trader. And the Southern Song made more revenues. They made more revenues from trade, from taxes on imports and exports than they did on their domestic trade. So the Chinese merchant marine, the Chinese merchants started being the dominant traders, which they still are today down in Southeast Asia. 5 minutes left. Now, why the tragedy? Because China also, during this glorious Southern Song, I had you look at the map of, the chart of technological inventions. Look what this Song dynasty did under the wise government of smart people who can pass a test. Not be elected by dumb people who will believe anything an advertisement tells them or a politician tells them. Smart people who can pass a test and can't cheat because they were so good at catching cheaters. They invented the printing press. And so the government was able to publish books. But wait a minute, how can you publish books for peasants who can't read? They published cartoon books. These were government publications in agricultural technology in cartoon form, Agricultural manuals of the latest agricultural techniques. Government publishes them. Government sends them to farmers all throughout the empire in order to improve agriculture through the latest innovation, technology, and science. So the book, in Europe, the book was invented, when was the printing press invented? I want to say 1450-ish. In China, it's about 1,000. And that includes movable type, right? Gutenberg didn't invent it. China did it 500 years before Germany did. Besides that, because of this massive long-distance trade in the southern Song, weird things start happening, like banks start developing. Same thing that happened in Europe during the Age of Exploration 500 years later. If this ship sinks full of all this merchandise, I'm a totally poor man. I'm not going to take the risk. So how can we make money? Hey, how about we all share the risk of this shipment? And so joint stock companies start breaking up, start forming. They start using paper money, promissory notes, all sorts of stuff. It's really hard to carry enough cash to trade in India when you're talking the equivalent of millions of dollars of merchandise today. So they're the first ever to use paper money. They go into the steel age. Hear this. They manufacture more steel in, again, we're talking about really by 1150 or so. The Song is in full swing. They manufacture more steel than England did in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. You know, steel, that stuff that you make the steam engine with, that battleships need, they made more steel than the Industrial Revolution. England, which for those of you who don't know your history was in the 1800s. We're talking 1100, 1000. So you've got steel manufacturing, you've got banking, you've got global trade, you've got a shipbuilding industry that is top notch. That'll become important in the Ming Dynasty with Zheng He and such. I will show you the architecture. I always forget to show you the scholar gardens. Have any of you seen the exquisite, highly civilized garden homes that the scholars lived in the Song Dynasty? Don't you dare start packing. In the Song Dynasty, have any of you seen the pictures of the garden homes that they lived in or been to them? With the, oh God, okay. I have to show you that because it's like a fantasy novel, the lifestyles of these scholars. By the way, it's at this point that women start binding their foot. Please remind me to show you the pictures of bound feet women. How many of you know nothing about foot binding? Okay, see, I always assume that people do, but I can't assume that. And so, their diplomatic relations are like saying, hey, we'll pay you for peace. We've got a strong army, but we would rather just pay you for peace. How civilized can this place be? Commercially, diplomatically, politically, smart people, on and on and on. They're not pushing their weight around, they're not trying to expand it, but they're getting filthy rich through also all of these commercial and industrial revolution things. And then in comes Genghis Khan's grandson, Genghis Khan's grandson. The Mongols up here, first they conquer all the way over to almost Vienna, Austria, all the way over where they conquer Korea. They try to take Japan, but they fail. So this is Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire, biggest empire the world's ever seen until the British. What they couldn't conquer was the southern Song. They conquered those Jurchens that conquered the Khitans above them, or the Liao above them. Genghis Khan died before the Mongols could take the Song. But his grandson, Kublai Khan, did take the Song finally, and China fell. Let's start next class with the mind-boggling question. If Genghis Khan had not, and these guys had done the Industrial Revolution first, before Europe, a Confucian civilization, a Taoist civilization, with industrial technology, before the British have it, with a Christian capitalist mentality, how different would the world be? How different would the world be?